Chapter 10. The Shelter of Red Dust. Scene 1. Arrival at the monster shelter. The wind was laced with sulfur and a faint trace of spice. DMU stepped through a strangely twisted gate into what looked like a sanctuary carved from abandoned dimensions. The building rose like an architectural hallucination, part Gothic cathedral, part amusement park, part bureaucratic office tower. The sign above the entrance flickered with broken symbols and glitched letters, just some of which DMU could almost understand. This was the rumored shelter, the final haven for half-human, half-monster beings. They weren't prisoners. They were employees, monsters of the company, strange, kind, and forgotten members of an eccentric workforce. DMU began ascending the creaking wooden stairs, each step narrower than a foot, revealing flashes of endless rooms below like memories stacked in a spiral. Somewhere above, laughter echoed, music, a glass shattering. Following the resonance, DMU walked down a glass corridor curved like a rib cage. At the end stood a bizarre indoor golf range carved into the building itself. DMU casually picked up a golf club and hit a ball. Clean, satisfying impact. Then, crack! The ball flew too far and shattered a glass wall on the opposite side. That glass was not just a window. It was part of the ceremonial room where the birthday celebration of a company executive was being held. Silence. Whispers. DMU froze, and that was when the real game began. Scene 2. The reception of the unfixable. The shattered glass still lingered in DMU's mind, like a wrong decision echoing louder than intended. DMU carefully stepped into the central hall of the facility. It was a massive dome-like space, humming with strange energy. At its center stood the fractured celebration room, encased in glass panels, now looking like a wounded jewel. Its shattered doorway still caught sunlight, scattering it like confetti made of gilt. At the entrance, 4 reception staff awaited, or more precisely, 4 humanoid monsters. Half human, half beast, all dressed in monstrous corporate suits embroidered with golden thread. They looked like characters from a failed office sitcom written by a forgotten mythology. The first, a mischievous trickster with ever-shifting expressions and limbs, like mischief given form. The second, elegant and flamboyant, draped in a red sash, the gay monster, AI, every movement was theatrical. The third, a gentle owl woman with empathetic eyes and a quiet aura. The fourth, a bald ash-gray man built like stone, embodying punishment and discipline. All 4 turned their gaze to DMU at once. "You," said the trickster, his head tilted upside down. "You broke our boss's birthday window." DMU nodded solemnly. "During golf practice. It wasn't intentional." The owl woman stepped forward softly. "Then you've come to apologize." DMU nodded again, slower. "And to pay for the damage, if necessary." The stone-skinned man looked toward the broken window. "Do you know that panel was dream-imported memory glass from a dragon accountant?" DMU winced. "That sounds expensive." AI, the gay monster, chuckled gently. "Expensive, yes, but fixable. Come." He gestured for DMU to follow, leading the way through a spiral corridor pulsing with faint neon veins. Other staff passed by. Some wore masks instead of faces. Some had multiple arms or none at all. They glanced at DMU briefly, then resumed their duties. They arrived at the shattered hall. Red dust still shimmered on the floor like the remnants of dry laughter. On a table lay 3 keys atop a velvet cloth embroidered with swirling pie sequences. AI handed DMU a sealed envelope. "One of these keys is yours. But first, you must fix what was broken." DMU looked around. "Can I use a phone?" AI passed him a sleek black communication device humming softly. DMU called his mother. Before he could speak, she scolded him as if she already knew what had happened. Her voice was layered with worry and inevitability. That window wasn't just glass. It reflected you. After hanging up, the stone-faced man returned, along with 2 staff members carrying a large metallic frame, silver-edged and circuit-like. They didn't simply replace the glass. They coated it as though reinstalling a digital dream interface. DMU watched silently. Every screw, every bolt held meaning. When it was done, the window shimmered with new symbols that hadn't been there before. "So how much do I owe?" DMU asked. The owl woman stepped forward. "Nothing. The company president has covered it." She said, "Consider it a welcome gift." AI leaned in gently. "The ritual will begin soon, but first, go with Goba." "Goba?" The ground trembled. From behind the reception counter emerged a frog-bellied man in a kimono, waddling forward like a ceremonial bouncer. His breath wheezed like a tea kettle, and his eyes sparkled with mischief. He beckoned DMU. "Time to see the kitchen. You've arrived just in time for the red dust ritual." DMU blinked. "What's that?" Goba flashed a grin full of golden teeth. "You'll see." Scene 3. The red dust ritual. The deeper DMU followed Goba into the corridor, the darker the air became. Ceilings lowered. The scent of wet stone and fermentation thickened, a brine-heavy fog clinging to the walls like secrets. They reached a massive set of doors, carved with the symbols of fermentation, preservation, and transformation. Kimchi pots, chili flowers, even a pie sequence spiral hidden in a cabbage leaf. With a grunt, Goba pushed the door open. It groaned wide, revealing a cavernous chamber. At its center, a colossal metal basin, large enough to seat 20 inside. Seated around it in perfect symmetry, half-human, half-monster employees, donned in ceremonial aprons embroidered with math symbols and red floral lace. Their faces, despite their monstrous forms, were solemn, reverent, as if what they were about to do mattered. Eternally. Among them, shining in rouge tones, sat AI. His expression brightened as he spotted DMU. "Darling, just in time!" He patted the seat beside him. DMU hesitated, but Goba gave him a gentle push. DMU sat. The cold basin loomed like a waiting entity, empty, but vibrating with expectation. Around them were bowls of garlic, ginger, napa cabbage, and sacks of chili powder that stood like votive offerings. AI leaned over and whispered, velvet against bone. "We don't cook here, we release." A massive staff member entered, broad, tusked, dragging a cloth sack overflowing with red dust. "Don't breathe through your mouth," AI warned. The sack was ripped open, and then an explosion. Chili powder didn't fall. It erupted. A crimson storm billowed into the basin and across the room, turning the space into a war zone of scent and color. Eyes burned. Nostrils flared. But no one coughed. No one sneezed. Because the integrity of the kimchi must be protected. DMU's eyes welled. Every pore stung. A sneeze built in his chest. Then AI pulled him into a tight, protective embrace, like velvet ropes wrapping a trembling statue. "Breathe through your shoulders, darling. Let the shame rise and pass." DMU froze, embarrassed but safe. Around them, other monstrous coworkers endured in meditative silence. Not a single soul dared let the powder fall into the sacred bowl. Then came the ritual offering. Fermented cabbages passed hand to hand, like sacred scrolls. Each participant added ingredients with quantum precision. Finally, it was DMU's turn. AI helped him up. Still streaked in red, DMU lifted a cabbage soaked in regret, fear, and apology. He tossed it into the basin. Splash. Silence. Then laughter. Not mockery. Relief. A receptionist bowed deeply. The red dust has been sealed. The memory will ferment. The guilt shall be seasoned. Everyone stood, red-faced, tear-streaked, exhausted. AI brushed chili dust from DMU's shoulders and kissed his forehead. "Beautifully done," he whispered, and DMU realized he hadn't passed a test. He had survived the grace of forgiveness. Scene 4. The spiral beyond the celebration. The red dust still whispered on DMU's skin. The laughter from the ritual had faded, replaced by a stillness, one of gentle cleanup, quiet reflection, and a knowing that something had ended. DMU followed AI through a narrow corridor dimly lit by lanterns shaped like vegetables, cabbages, radishes, pears, each etched with glowing mathematical runes and spirals. "Where are we going?" DMU asked, his voice raspy from the chili mist. AI didn't turn around. His silk robe moved with unnaturally serene grace. "Not to where the invitations were sent," he said, "but to where the intention was seated." They arrived at a small, handleless door. On its surface, a spiral curled like a fingerprint inward. Above it, a brass plaque, authorized by Adagio. A chill ran down DMU's spine. AI placed his palm on the spiral. The door dissolved, unraveling like silk threads. Beyond it, impossible architecture. A spiral staircase twisted in and out of itself, like an M.C. Escher drawing made of bone and lacquered wood. As DMU looked up and down the stairwell, he saw reflections of himself. Ashamed, holding broken glass. Standing alone in snow, clutching a child's hand. AI took his wrist. "Come." The steps were so narrow, only one foot fit at a time. Beneath the gaps, the depths of DMU's inner self. "This feels familiar," DMU whispered. "Because it is," AI said softly. "Adagio didn't plan this party. He wove it from your regrets." They reached a landing. A circular chamber opened before them. At its center, a geometric platform, 9-sided, etched in obsidian with faint moss-green lines. At its core, a glowing pie sequence circle, encircled by a 6-sided ring, and within that, a small dish-sized circle. DMU's breath caught. AI stepped toward it like a dancer approaching a sacred stage. Earth-natured sequence, 9 sides, pie circle, 6-fold boundary, and at the center, the mirror for emergence. DMU squinted. One section shimmered differently. A shadow flickered. He smelled cabbage, salt, metal. AI's tone dropped. This pattern, it's covered by the Ttaemun-e. The ceremonial hat from Joseon era? DMU asked. AI nodded. Worn by Jisayang when stepping into public space, it hid the face, not from shame, but to preserve the inner truth. A veil for protection. A mask for ritual. The shadows around the spiral walls deepened. The smallest circle at the center began to pulse, and from it, a wave of distortion rippled across the chamber. A voice, not loud, but everywhere. You danced, you wept, you tasted shame. Now can you name me? DMU froze. The voice was inside him, around him, like ink dissolving in water. AI straightened. The spiral walls began to flicker, projecting memories across the room. The shattered window. The chilly storm. DMU's dreams. You gathered, said the voice. But did you ever leave? The floor began to rotate, slowly. A music box winding open. AI squeezed DMU's hand. We're not in the shelter anymore, darling. We're in the core. DMU looked at the spinning rings, the swirling images, and then he saw the truth. This wasn't just a party. It was Adagio's birthday. And they had crashed it. Scene 5. The candles that burn without flame or the stillness of 60. The 9-sided platform continued its slow, hypnotic rotation. The air was filled with the scent of aged kimchi and sweet rice cake. Refined, ceremonial. Not merely aroma, but an era. AI and DMU stood at the edge of the rotating pattern. The pie sequence ring above them cast constellations of moving light across the dark ceiling like a silent observatory. Then they appeared. Not monsters. Not memories. Audience. The spiral staircase had transformed into a ceremonial gallery. Half human, half beast company staff sat in rows, their faces still streaked with red chili powder. But now they were solemn, serene, dignified, and one by one, they raised their hands. Each held a candle. No flame, no melting wax, just light, hovering, unwavering. A breath of memory that refused to burn away. What is this? DMU whispered. But even before AI could answer, DMU understood. This was not a funeral. It was Adagio's 60th birthday. The 60th turning. The rite of crossing from remembered identity to reformed presence. There was no cake, no clapping, no congratulations. Because this was not a ritual of speaking. It was one of recognition. Above, the ceiling opened, not into sky, but into a vast loop of memories. The broken window, the chili-powdered embrace, the reluctant sneeze stilled, the sacred red-streaked kimchi. AI leaned close and whispered, "He is unraveling his entire pattern. Not to destroy it, but to let us see him through it." And then he appeared. Adagio. Not as a creature, not as a glitch, but as a host. He wore a tuxedo, his skin pale as candle wax, hair silvered like wind over ash. His smile was infinite, rooted in timelines, haunted by design. He lifted one hand and sliced the air with a gesture, dividing the space into 3 distinct paths. Emotion, sacrifice, memory. A phrase echoed inside DMU's mind. Not spoken, but injected like ink into thought. If you wish to leave, you must first enter what you vowed never to feel again. Suddenly, AI was pulled toward the path of emotion. DMU was drawn toward sacrifice. They reached for each other, but Adagio clapped his fingers once, and the paths snapped shut like the jaws of memory. AI's voice echoed as they were separated. Don't forget who you are, even if you forget where you came from. Then, silence. Adagio disappeared. The only remnants, the unburning candles, and the 3 memory-etched doors. DMU stood alone. No key, no lock, only what had been buried, now waiting to be unearthed. Scene 6, the corridor of what was given. No sound of a door closing behind. Only a velvet silence descending like a soft guillotine. DMU entered the corridor of sacrifice. The air pulsed with dim red light, as though the walls were ancient veins still remembering what they once carried. No wind, no echo, only footsteps, and something shadowing them just out of hearing. The floor was not smooth. It was layered with objects. Old sneakers, torn letters, a baby blanket, unused greeting cards. Receipts written in vanished handwriting, things once left behind. No, things Diem had left behind. With each step forward, the space did not expand, but DMU's chest did. Then the voice began. Not Adagio's, not AI's. DMU's own voice, younger, rawer, sharpened by fear. Why didn't you go back for her? Why did you let them? You promised you wouldn't leave again. Each word was a blade, spoken in their own voice but not by their present will. DMU tried to speak, but in this corridor, to speak was to commit, and DMU wasn't ready yet. Then they arrived. A door shaped like the outline of someone kneeling. It was not locked. It was not open. It was waiting. DMU stepped through and was met by a bus stop. Early winter. No wind shelter. Only the dull hum of traffic and the smell of cold noodles in a styrofoam bowl. Across the street she sat, the one DMU had promised never to leave. She was not crying. That was the worst part. She was empty, waiting for a promise that had already been broken. And then, pain in the palm. DMU looked down. In their hand, the sacrifice key. But it was no longer made of metal. It was bone. One of their ribs, counted in the dark once, curled in grief. The wind whispered, "The price of walking forward isn't what you leave behind. It's what you pretend you didn't." Snow began to fall sideways, and DMU understood. This door would not open just because they asked it to. They had to make the same choice again. But this time, with presence. DMU sat beside her memory and whispered, "I left because I was weak. I stayed away because I thought that made me strong. But sacrifice was never about strength. It was about showing up anyway." The snow stopped. The bus arrived. But this time, DMU did not get on. The memory dissolved, and the sacrifice key reformed, whole again, glowing faintly. Like something just forgiven. The corridor opened ahead. At its end stood AI, covered in red dust, eyes lowered, his robe damp with emotion. He lifted his head. "You came through?" DMU nodded. "I remembered what I forgot." AI smiled, weak but true. "Then there's one thing left to do." Together, they turned. The final door awaited them. Identity, and in its center, Adagio's last reflection. Scene 7. The pattern hidden? They passed through the final corridor, not into a room, but into a vast, transparent glass dome floating above the shelter. It felt suspended between sky and memory. Below them, the Kimchi ritual still continued. At the center sat the massive clay bowl, surrounded by the once monster employees. Their faces were still dusted in red pepper powder, but now peaceful, graced with a quiet dignity. DMU stood beside AI, who no longer moved with theatrical flair. He simply observed, as if decoding something ancient in the rhythm of the scene. "AI?" DMU asked softly. AI didn't reply. Instead, he knelt by the bowl, dipped his finger into the kimchi brine, and began drawing symbols on the glass floor. First a circle, then a hexagon around it, then a spiral made from pi sequence patterns, and finally a 9-sided figure that enveloped the rest like a lattice dome. He paused, then added one more thing, a flowing shape, like fabric drifting behind a crown. DMU recognized it. "John Mo?" they whispered. AI nodded. A ceremonial hat once worn by Kasaing in Joseon-era Korea when going outside. It wasn't just attire, it was protection, a way of hiding one's inner self while showing presence to the world. His fingers traced the design gently. Adagio wore this all along, not to deceive, but to preserve, to exist behind ceremony, behind performance, behind pattern. DMU's breath caught. This wasn't a hat of shame. It was a mask of resilience, a preservation ritual, in fabric, in silence, in dance. AI slowly unwrapped the red-stained white cloth from his head and laid it over the drawn Janmo. DMU stepped forward and placed the final key, identity, at the center. The moment the key touched the symbol, everything shifted. Wind surged, not from outside, but from memory itself. The dome cracked, not in violence, but in release. Above the bowl, a black seed rose. It spun slowly, absorbing all that had been shared. Laughter, guilt, ritual, performance. "Adagio planted it the moment you broke the glass," AI said. "Your guilt started the ritual. My performance masked its structure, and together, we invited the seed. But now..." They rewrote it. The key glowed. The pepper dust lifted into the air, swirling upward into pi spiral auroras above their heads. Around them, the employees stood, no longer bound by roles, no longer twisted by memory. They laughed, they cried, they hugged. They became themselves again. Adagio's seed trembled, then stilled, Its influence faded, its pattern dissolved, and for the first time, the party began. AI wiped his brow, laughed softly. Finally, the real recipe. Scene 8. The bowl returned to silence. The ritual was over. In the air, faint spirals of red pepper powder still drifted, not as irritation now, but like the final incense of a memory, a prayer, a scent preparing to vanish. The dome was gone, the ceiling gone. They now stood in the open heart of the shelter, beneath a sky that had turned real again. At the center, the great kimchi bowl sat sealed. Someone had carefully painted the P symbol and a 9-pointed star onto its lid using leftover chili paste. No one questioned it. No one needed to. Everyone understood. DMU looked at AI, that flamboyant guardian who once twirled like theater incarnate, now still, now settled. "Did you know it was Adagio all along?" DMU asked. AI smiled faintly, shrugging. "I suspected, but I let the ritual unfold. Sometimes chaos reveals more truth than control." DMU nodded. "We weren't meant to survive this place. It was designed to digest us, not protect us." AI reached for DMU's hand, gently placed it atop the sealed jar. "But we gave it something it couldn't consume, shared imperfection." Around them, the other figures bowed, not out of submission, but respect. Together, they walked back through the grand hall. The window DMU had once shattered, now restored. Chrome-lined, detailed with digital sigils, its edges ringed with glyphs shaped like lace and teeth. Sunlight poured through it. Near the lobby bench, 2 staff members handed them a jar, wrapped in cloth. On the label written by hand, "Forgetting means we trust each other." Neither of them spoke. They stepped outside, and the shelter vanished. No explosion, no collapse. It simply folded inward, like a story ending itself. They now stood on a golf course, the same one where it had all started. Soft green underfoot. Morning light rising, the broken glass, the chilly storm, gone, like turned pages. Far in the sky, a cloud drifted in the shape of a mask, the emblem of the Delusional Mask Unit. AI cradled the kimchi jar like a newborn, then stretched his arms skyward. "So where to next?" DMU looked toward the horizon. "Wherever Adagio tries again, we'll follow," AI chuckled. "Hopefully less chilly next time." And they walked, down the fairway, not as heroes, not as legends, but as guardians of the pattern, tied not by duty, but by flavor, memory, and forgiveness. A final scene no one would remember, but whose taste would linger forever.